What is going to happen to the Conservative Party after the general election could be anyone's guess, but it is one that is absolutely going to be fraught, full of civil war, which we are already potentially now seeing the true battle lines start to be drawn. And of course, everyone's now getting their pointed sticks ready and sharpening them, ready to go over the top when the shall we say, the dust clears after the general election. And no doubt, of course, as we talked before, there will be almost certainly some form of fight take place, not only within the actual parliamentary party, but more specifically, where some of the real power lies, of course, in the non-parliamentary party. Who takes positions? What groups dictate the future within that party? It is going to be fascinating to watch, and don't worry, we will be there for it, covering it, because oh boy, it's going to be fun. That's for sure. But I've been teasing you guys about the Tory civil war for years, and we've seen glimpses of it. Maybe some people break cover into a minor bit of a skirmish, but trust me, you ain't seen anything yet, and it is going to be delicious. It is going to be delicious because, as I keep on reminding you, the more you destroy them, the more seats they lose, the worse it becomes, and the more they are kept out of power for a decade, if not more. And the more that decade is clear, the more stuff and progressive stuff we get to do in the meantime. So remember that is the promise that we've said many times at this general election. Deal with that first at this general election first. Then, we can deal with the rest when you've, kindly, swept the Tories away quite significantly. But of course, there are now rumors, of course, of rebel manifestos, potentially, maybe even more than one, because apparently Lawrence Fox's sugar daddy is trying to tempt Conservative MPs away to back his party's manifesto by giving them like £5,000. We'll see if any Tories end up taking up that mantle, but I haven't heard of any doing it yet. But oh boy, things are finally going to get, I think, quite interesting, because once again, you can always tell when Conservative Home is panicking about Nigel Farage. And that's what we're going to cover today. But before we do go getting into that, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page, the one off link called Buy Me Coffee, we can well buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there is the Pony Club down below as well. And of course, it was Pony Club video yesterday as well. So if you're a Patreon member or you are part of the YouTube subscription, go check those videos out. Like I say, we are nearing our 100th video. So please do let me know in those videos what you want me to do, or for the 100th video. But like I say, I want to do something big. Of course, it is the 100th video, the 100th Pony Club video. So we'll do or think of something that we can do. But on with this. So, but of course, do remember to click on the like, share, and of course, if you are new, hit the subscribe button as well. So strap in, folks. This again could be quite a long one, but here we have once more Conservative Home panicking about Nigel Farage uniting the right, and of course, how exactly or how on earth do they actually do that when the Tory party is so fractious that they can't even bring themselves together to even have peace talks? So this is, of course, Henry Hill on Conservative Home with the title of "It is no good trying to, quote, unite the right until we have answered the critical question around what." So this morning's Times reports that Suella Braverman has now urged the Conservatives to embrace Nigel Farage on the basis that there is not much difference between Nigel Farage's position and the party's own, saying that the Conservatives should be, quote, a broad church and a welcoming party. She said that the Tories should find a way to merge with Reform UK because we, quote, would be divided on this side of the political spectrum. Braverman said that she welcomes Sunak's more hardline approach to immigration, such as his new policy to introduce a cap on work and family visas, and is now trying to toughen the stance on the European Convention of Human Rights, joking that he had, quote, adopted the Suella agenda. So basically, the Tories are lurching even more to the right, forever trying to chase that reform vote, an ever shrinking, decreasing section of the vote that they are losing so much of. And yet, you have Sir Ola Braverman comes out and said, "Oh, we should embrace Nigel Farage. We should absolutely welcome him back into the party." Post post general election, who knows? Maybe that could be the case. Like I say, Nigel Farage is running in Clacton. That is the only area where I think UKIP, shall we say, has ever actually won a seat. So there is every possibility Nigel Farage, MP Nigel Farage, God help us, um, will be there and may even then say, well, I'm going to switch to be a conservative if you welcome me back into the party. But of course, what is he going to demand? He is going to demand leadership of the party. And that will scare away the rest of the moderates. People like Suella Braverman love to say all that stuff about broad church, welcoming party. They are completely forgetting the rest of the moderate Tories that they completely keep on forgetting about, that completely are disagreeing with the direction of their travel. Which is why one of the reasons why they're in such trouble at this campaign. But anyway, let's continue. So Henry Hill continues. So, given, of course, the state of the campaign, with many Tories now expecting a crossover poll where the reform now overtakes them, such a talk is now not surprising. It is also true that the Conservatives have obviously historically now benefited from being the only major party of the right in British politics. There was, of course, much to complain about with the way that David Cameron went about with the EU referendum, holding such a vote with the government on the status quo while totally unwinding the impending change was now insane. But his progressive critics are wrong to think that he could or should just have ignored the rising threat of UKIP. I think they could have absolutely ignored the rising threat of UKIP. If they had remained, if they had remained and continued David Cameron's, you know, right sort of centrist ground and sort of continued sort of campaigning on that, they could have gladly ignored UKIP because there would have always been that right wing section of the party, just as we see on the left. There is a section of the left who, regardless whatever would happen, are never ever going to vote for Labour. And Labour just aren't interested in going to chase after them because it is actually a very small number of votes that they would actually achieve. They would lose far more from the centrists. We've gone over this. The biggest voting bloc in the UK is centrists. Like it or not, is the only biggest bloc. You have to be a broad church. Even if we adopt PR, centrist parties will be the biggest parties. Just the reality. And if you want even more to say how much that centrist bloc is, over the years, that has actually increased from about 30% to 35%. Neither left or right have increased or decreased during that time, but the centrist one has. So we know now where the real battlegrounds are. And to try and distinguish yourself in the center can be somewhat quite hard. This is why you do see pivots to left centrism, right centrism, etc. And we're probably going to see that play out, certainly as the future of UK politics. The Conservatives are about to find out that very hard, and they're going to take years to try and learn this lesson. Because if they go and they chase after that, that reform vote, well, we know it's a tiny amount of votes they are really getting. At the end of the day, it's not worth chasing after, but they are intent to go and chase after it. So, hey, David Cameron's progressive critics did have, I think, very many, very valid points on that. So, back to this. So, having now come second in hundreds of constituencies in 2015, It seemed all but certain that the then so-called People's Army would have become a proper parliamentary force and had something not been done to head them off. Um, we'll never know. We'll never know. Um, had a referendum not been called uh, at that point, I think David Cameron and the rest of the Conservatives could have headed them off if they wanted to, but that would have meant big changes within the party, even kicking out, of course, as we've said many times, those far right wing nutcases within the Tory party. But it is something that is going to have to happen sooner or later. Um, like I say, that is only going to lead to more consternation, more civil warring in the Tory party. Everything you can see is leading to this direction. And even these conservative commentators like Henry Hill, they know it's going to happen. They know it's going to break open, but even they cannot admit the huge civil war that is about to break out within their party because they can't even dare talk about it because they know just how bad it is going to be. Anyway, back to this. But Reform UK is, of course, not UKIP. For all of that is basically the same idea with just a new lick of paint. It doesn't have, of course, the party's very long history, nor its activist base, nor even its presence in local government. If Farage is elected in Clacton, securing both a parliamentary platform and of course, short money, the medium-term risk posed by the party might change. There might, of course, well come a point where serious negotiations to, quote, reunite the right are necessary. Good luck in those talks because we know what Farage is going to demand. We know what he's going to ask. And that would take the Tory party in a very, very hard right direction. A direction which they do not seem to be winning even right now. However, that would also represent a very remarkable failure on the part of the Conservative Party. Even allowing for some of the more catastrophic scenarios imagined by the current polling, it should still outnumber Reform UK in Parliament by over 100 to 1, with a corresponding disparity in its financial resources and, of course, the national infrastructure. Consider Canada. So many times they keep on bringing up Canada. But if you want to know about Canada, we did an entire video about Canada 93, why the Conservatives keep on referring to Canada 1993. So go give that video a watch if you want to learn more about that. Otherwise, we'll be off on a big tangent talking about that. But anyway, back to this. So consider Canada, which is now becoming the now go-to example for a proper worst case scenario. Even, of course, the eventual success and rectifying of the right into a single party. In 1993, the ruling progressive Conservatives were then routed so utterly that they were now reduced to just 2 seats. The right-wing Reform Party broke into Parliament for the first time in over 50 years, yet despite that, it took 10 years and 2 further elections in the PCs placed 5th before they merged into 2 of the modern Conservative Party of Canada. And this is what I keep on talking about. 10 years of just conservative chaos. Imagine the progress we can make between now and then if the Conservative Party is going to be in absolute chaos for the next 10 years, if not more. So, if nothing else, it would be slightly embarrassing if the Conservative Party, obviously armed with both longer and a far more illustrious history than the PCs, and of course a far much stronger relative position, sold itself more quickly and even more cheaply than its Canadian counterpart. And to be honest, given, of course, Suella Braverman's statement at the top of this, I think she is willing to sell off the Conservative Party's silverware to Nigel Farage and Reform for very, very cheaply. Very, very cheaply indeed. But the more substantive reason, of course, to talk is to participate that there is, at present, no coherent agenda for which any reunification could take place. Reform UK currently enjoys a normal advantage of a minor party, and that it doesn't actually have to produce anything resemble of a working program for government. We've talked about this before. Small minor parties can pretty much say whatever they want and get away with it because they're not going to be in government. But there you go. Its diagnosis is, of course, it does not now to need to engage even properly or even with the trade-offs of the practicalities of implementation. At present, any merger would be little more than a union of the Tories and a renegade id. It might be, of course, more comfortable for MPs to instead focus on the need to win votes to their right. But the cold, hard truth is that the overwhelming majority of losses next month will be to Labour and the Liberal Democrats. The path back to office, however long and winding, runs through those voters. And where are Labour and the Lib Dem getting those votes? It is from overwhelmingly the centre. And yet, they are obsessed with saying, we have to go right, we have to go right. They have to chase that Reform UK voting bloc, which is an ever tiny, tiny number of votes that even if they do get it, doesn't necessarily guarantee that they are going to win. Because how many centrists do they lose in chasing that right-wing reform vote? So that does not mean, as some commenters claim, that the Conservatives must do nothing but take back towards the imagined centre, which is anomaly a label adopted by people who hold a clutch of minority positions in which they imagine to be the middle of their own Overton window, as I recently wrote elsewhere. Yeah. The center doesn't exist. The center just completely doesn't exist. There's no such thing as the center. There's only left and right. Please do continue to hold that illusion, my friend. But why are the Labour and Liberal Democrats, doing so well at the moment? But sure, it has nothing to do with all those centrists, right? Anyway, he continues. Anyway, the politics, of course, being sensible can all too easily stray into the politics of being easy short-term decisions, even as the long-term costs and political and real become increasingly unsustainable. Congratulations, you've just pretty much described your own entire party and its own short-termism thinking. This is what was the big problems of the Tory party. For a party that's been in power this long, its long-term goals just have not been existing. In fact, we've even saw back to the Cameron days of thinking no longer and no more than 6 months ahead. That is incredibly bad. And yet you've got potentially, the Labour Party about to win, thinking with long-term plans. That alone is going to be so good for our politics. Just so good. I mean, we've even got an industrial plan. And I can't wait to go over that. I generally cannot wait to go over an industrial plan. Imagine how boring that stream is going to be, going over an industrial plan, but it's going to be just so good. Anyway, he continues. There is, of course, plenty of scope, indeed, and need for radical changes to the oh-so-sensible status quo. Mass immigration exacerbates the housing crisis and props up the low productivity economy. Without raising living standards, large parts of the higher education sector freight taxpayers and youth and young workers with debt merely to dispatch workers into job that school leavers did a generation before. Forward projections of our biggest public spending commitments are now unsustainable. They're not unsustainable at all. You can't absolutely fund many of these things. You've just got to go, well, where the money is. Start taxing things properly. Start looking at the fact that a lot of Britain's wealth is actually clogged up into assets, mostly buildings. That is something that would need to radically change to be able to get that done. But that is going to be very hard to do, and it's going to take a long time to achieve. But that's another video, probably for another time. But anyway, there you go. So on those areas, and of course others, such as tax and family policy, there are, of course, plenty room for newer answers. Trying to find those answers and trying to understand why there is so and being a total failure to meet those challenges in office must be the mission of the Conservative Party in opposition. And they ain't going to be willing to do that. They are not going to be willing to do that, because if you had a party that was not willing to acknowledge its failures in government, why is it going to acknowledge those failures when it is in opposition? They are going to continue on this ideological driven road for hell for high leather, and it is going to take a long time for them to do that. And like I say, the more that happens, the more that leaves us to go and pursue a lot of progressive agendas. So that agenda, of course, will then may arise from the process and may even well prove a basis for an eventual formal reunion of the right. But despondent Tories should not forget that a coherent right-wing diagnosis of what ails the 21st century Britain, and of course an attractive set of propositions, might also win back voters on their own terms. Focusing instead on winning over a pie that is free to call an immediate freeze in immigration, lower taxes, and protecting any spending voters care about, promises only to waste precious time into a retreat of magical thinking. And of course, every single one of these is completely despondent about what are we going to do over this. And yeah, I like this quote. So this was, of course, talking about, David Cameron's critics are completely wrong to think that he or she should have ignored the rising threat of UKIP. So he says, the counterfactual here is the Conservative Party, which did not risk our economic isolation through a reckless referendum, i.e. pre-2015 EU membership, was way down on the list of voters' concerns. So why could this have been, this could have easily been managed. The economy would have just be in better shape and the blue wall at least would be secure. But Cameron put party before country to be Ed Miliband. It completely ruined our reputation for sound risk management of the economy and ushered in an era of cakeism. Nice chap, but guiltier than Boris Johnson may trust even Rishi for immense decline. And that is honestly, I think, the truth, that if the Conservatives ever hope to get back into power, they have to relearn pragmatism. They have to relearn pragmatism, that you might want these things, but it's not practical to actually do it, or should we say want it, because just like a car that chases after an ambulance, what does the dog do once it catches the ambulance? Not a lot. And that's exactly what happened with Brexit. The promises that Brexit it would do, that it would usher in, could never ever be met. They knew it. It was a fantasy. But they sold that fantasy as a promise of what they could possibly deliver. And this is where you get people like Kimmy Badnoch, even though she was a hard committed Brexiteer, saying, I will not be an arsonist and burn all this Brexit red tape. So the Conservative Party, until it relearns pragmatism, which is going to take it a very, very long time to do so, they're just going to be nicely on the sidelines, while we progressives are going to be able to get on and do a lot of progressive stuff. Because one of the things Henry Hill doesn't mention there is that when you poll people in the UK on like progressive things and progressive values or progressive policies, overwhelmingly the UK public actually does want those progressive things. So don't worry too much that the centrists are the largest bloc, because overwhelmingly they actually do want a lot of progressive things. So don't worry about them. Learn to love them, learn to embrace them, because you can do a lot of stuff if you are willing to work together with people. And I think that's what hopefully is going to be a lesson that we take forward going forward. Because if we can do that, there's a lot of stuff we can indeed go forward and achieve. So until then, and of course, until next time, please leave a like, please click on the share button, leave a comment down below on what you think. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.